Georgia Governor Brian Kemp's announcement that he won't run for Senate in 2026 delivers a major blow to Republican hopes of flipping what is arguably the Democrats' most vulnerable seat on the map. Still, despite that break, Democrats remain at a fundamental disadvantage in their quest to win back the Senate majority. They'll enter the 2026 midterms needing to gain 4 seats, a tall order considering that of the 35 Senate seats up for election next November, 2 are in states Donald Trump carried in 2024, Michigan, and of course, Georgia. Another 5 seats are in states Kamala Harris carried by single-digit margins: New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, New Jersey, and New Hampshire. Meanwhile, Republicans are only defending 1 seat in a state that Harris carried, Susan Collins' seat in Maine, and North Carolina is the only other GOP-held seat in a Trump state with a single-digit margin. Bottom line, even after the Kemp news, the map still heavily favors Republicans. That said, let's go ahead and fill out the map to get a clearer picture of where both parties have opportunities to make gains. We'll start with the obvious. Many seats are safely in one party's column. For Democrats, there's little reason to worry about Oregon, where incumbent Jeff Merkley is seeking a 4th term. Merkley won his last 2 races by more than 15 points, and there's no indication that 2026 will be any different. I also expect John Hickenlooper to comfortably win re-election in Colorado, which he said will be his final term in the Senate. First elected in 2018 after serving 2 terms as governor, Hickenlooper benefits from the fact that Colorado has shifted further to the left than any other state over the past decade. Over in Illinois, longtime Democratic Senator Dick Durbin has announced he will not seek a 6th term, setting off a scramble among several prominent Illinois Democrats looking to capitalize on a rare open seat. That said, this one should stay safely in the Democratic column regardless of who's nominated. Republicans simply don't have a strong enough candidate to overcome the deep blue fundamentals here. While Illinois is certainly trending right, Kamala Harris still carried it by 11 points last November, and 2026 is expected to be a more favorable environment for Democrats than 2024 was. Finally, in the Northeast, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and Virginia are all safe Democratic holds, with incumbents expected to run for re-election in each state. New Jersey did trend significantly toward Trump in the 2024 presidential race, but it remains a fundamentally Democratic-leaning state, and the incumbent Cory Booker is very popular. And while Virginia was also decided by a single-digit margin in 2024, incumbent Mark Warner is signaling he intends to run for a 4th term, in which case the only thing that could make this race competitive is if outgoing Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin throws his hat in the ring. On the other side, Republicans have a significantly higher number of safe states. Before we go through them, though, if you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. When's the last time you checked on your home title? That's the legal proof you own your house. If you're like me, the answer is never. The problem is, in today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles, and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, your home title has been transferred out of your name. Then they take out loans using your equity or even sell your property. You won't even know it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice. That's why you need to stop what you're doing and find out today if you're already a victim. Use promo code EP at home, titlelock.com to make sure your title is still in your name. You'll also get a free title history report plus a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud should happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Go to HomeTitleLock.com now. Use promo code EP. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code EP. All right, now for the Republicans. There are so many deeply red states on this map, they're barely worth discussing individually. The only retirement we know of so far is Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. but that won't change anything. Kentucky remains one of the reddest states in the country. Altogether, these 16 solid GOP states bring the Republican total to 48 seats, just 2 shy of the 50 needed to retain control of the Senate, given J.D. Vance holds the tie-breaking vote as vice president. There is an outside chance that races in Alaska, Kansas, South Carolina, or Florida could become more competitive, especially in a strong blue wave year. However, in Alaska, with former Democratic Congresswoman Mary Peltola now expected to run for governor instead of Senate, incumbent Republican Dan Sullivan looks to have a clear path to re-election. Similarly, with Kansas's outgoing Democratic governor Laura Kelly making it clear she is absolutely not running for another office. Incumbent Republican Roger Marshall should cruise as well. Over in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham is also expected to have an easier time than he did in 2020, when he still won by 10 points, despite facing off against Jamie Harrison, who raised more money than any Senate candidate in history. And in Florida, as long as newly appointed Senator Ashley Moody secures the GOP nomination, Republicans should have no problem holding this seat. Moody has overperformed in both of her previous statewide races for Attorney General and is widely seen as a strong general election candidate. That leaves us with just 10 states still without a rating. Each of these remaining races are either expected to be competitive or carry enough uncertainty that assigning a safe rating at this point would simply be too premature. Let's start in New Mexico, one of the 5 Senate seats Democrats are defending in states Kamala Harris carried by single digits in 2024. The incumbent is Ben Ray Lujan, elected to his first term in 2020 with a 6-point win over Republican Mark Ronchetti, who was relatively unknown at the time. However, according to Split Ticket's wins above replacement score, Lujan underperformed expectations by over 5 points, suggesting he's not particularly strong as a candidate. That said, without a credible Republican challenger, this seat is very likely to remain in Democratic hands. Then there's Texas, which once again teased Democrats before slapping them in the face. The Lone Star State saw the 6th largest GOP swing between 2020 and 2024, with Trump winning it by 14 points. That effectively dashed any hopes Democrats had of unseating 4-term Republican Senator John Cornyn in 2026. However, the dynamic has shifted with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton officially launching a primary challenge against Cornyn, setting up a high-stakes clash between the GOP's establishment wing and its hardline conservative base. The two have been openly at odds for years, with Paxton calling Cornyn insufficiently conservative, while Cornyn has repeatedly pointed to Paxton's legal troubles, including his 2023 impeachment by the GOP-led Texas House. Trump has yet to endorse either candidate, but if he does, that endorsement would almost certainly tip the scales. As of now, prediction markets like Kalshi give Paxton a 60% chance of winning the primary. Paxton has led Cornyn in all 5 polls conducted so far, and by double digits in 4 of the surveys, but Cornyn holds incumbency advantages, boasts endorsements from several prominent U.S. senators, and has amassed a substantial war chest. If he survives the primary, he'd likely win re-election comfortably. But if Paxton is the nominee, the general election could tighten significantly, especially if Colin Allred or Beto O'Rourke jumps in on the Democratic side. For now, Texas remains in the likely Republican column, but keep an eye on it. If Paxton becomes the nominee, it could shift toward lean. Up in Nebraska, Republican Pete Ricketts is running for his first full term in the Senate. He's not particularly popular even within his own party, and there's a real chance that Dan Osborne could return as an independent candidate after coming within 7 points of defeating Deb Fischer last fall. Osborne proved himself a formidable fundraiser in 2024 and successfully positioned himself as neither a Democrat nor a Trump Republican, helping him pull support from independents, soft Republicans, and Democrats alike. For now, this one stays in the likely Republican column, but it could heat up quickly depending on how the field shapes up. Up in Minnesota, Democrat Tina Smith has announced she won't seek a second term, making this the first U.S. Senate race in the state without an incumbent since 2006, the same year Republicans last won a federal election in Minnesota. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan currently appears to have the early edge in the Democratic primary, with Congresswoman Angie Craig seen as the next most likely contender. On the Republican side, the most prominent name in the field so far is former NBA player Royce White, but he just lost to Amy Klobuchar by 16 points in 2024. Unless Republicans manage to recruit a significantly stronger candidate, Flanagan, or whoever ends up winning the Democratic nomination, should be favored to win comfortably. Shifting across the Great Lakes region, let's head to Michigan, where two-term Democrat Gary Peters is retiring. This race is shaping up to be one of the most competitive in the country, especially after Democrats lost the state in the 2024 presidential election. While Democrat Alyssa Slotkin narrowly held Debbie Stabenow's open seat last cycle, she did so by just 20,000 votes over former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers, who has now officially announced he's running again. On the Democratic side, with both Pete Buttigieg and outgoing Governor Gretchen Whitmer declining to run, the party is without a top-tier name. Right now, Congresswoman Haley Stevens is the front-runner among declared candidates, though Attorney General Dana Nessel would likely leapfrog her if she jumps in. As long as Republicans avoid a blunder, like nominating Tudor Dixon again, they'll have a very real shot at flipping this seat. For now, I'm rating it as tilt Democratic, just based on the fundamentals, which, assuming a decent national environment, should favor Democrats by a point or two. Down in Ohio, we're looking at a special election to fill the remainder of the Senate term vacated by Vice President J.D. Vance. Republican Governor Mike DeWine appointed Lieutenant Governor John Husted to replace Vance, and Husted is now running as an unelected incumbent. On the Democratic side, former Congressman Tim Ryan is reportedly eyeing a run for governor, which has shifted much of the attention and pressure to recently ousted Senator Sherrod Brown, who lost his bid for a fourth term in 2024 to Republican Bernie Moreno by about 3.5 points. According to the latest prediction market odds, Brown has better than a 40% chance of securing the Democratic nomination. And make no mistake, Brown running is almost certainly the Democrats' only viable path here. Husted is a mainstream, relatively moderate Republican, and Ohio is now a clearly Republican-leaning state, backing Trump by 11 points in 2024. Without Brown in the race, this would likely be a safe Republican hold, but as long as there's a legitimate chance Brown jumps in, the seat stays in the likely Republican column for now. And if Brown does enter the field, a lean or even tilt Republican rating could very well be in play. Let's head up to New England now, where we have two uniquely interesting contests. In New Hampshire, Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, and Congressman Chris Pappas is the first to enter the race to succeed her. At this point, he's likely to remain the most prominent Democrat in the field. Unfortunately for Republicans, former Governor Chris Sununu has officially decided not to run. He would have been their strongest possible contender by far. Instead, it now looks like former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown will likely win the GOP nomination. Brown's a strong candidate in his own right. He has statewide campaign experience and decent name recognition, and in a red wave year, he might even be favored over Pappas. But New Hampshire leans blue on fundamentals, and 2026 is shaping up to be a favorable cycle for Democrats, so I've got this race in the lean Democratic column for now. Up in Maine, Republican Senator Susan Collins continues to be a political unicorn. Back in 2020, nearly every poll and analyst predicted her defeat, yet she beat Democrat Sarah Gideon by 8 points, even as Joe Biden carried Maine by 9. To this day, she remains the only Republican to win a Senate race in a state carried by a Democratic presidential nominee since 2004. In 2026, Maine is the only Republican-held Senate seat in a state Kamala Harris won, and it's widely considered Democrats' top pickup opportunity. Their best possible challenger would have been Congressman Jared Golden, who once worked for Collins, but he has stated he won't run against his former boss. If Golden did run, I'd probably give the Democrats an edge, but without him, their best option is outgoing Governor Janet Mills, who doesn't necessarily boast awe-inspiring approval numbers. Right now, I have to give Collins the slight edge. It's essentially a toss-up, but given Collins' track record, she remains the narrow favorite, even though, on fundamentals alone, the state leans more Democratic than New Hampshire. Alrighty, let's wrap this up down the Atlantic coastline as we come to the two highest profile races of the cycle, North Carolina and Georgia. There's a good chance that when we look back on 2026, these two contests will define it. In North Carolina, Republican Thom Tillis is expected to seek a third term, although he may face a primary challenge. The state's Republican Party officially censured Tillis over his bipartisan support for gun control and same-sex marriage, and former RNC co-chair Laura Trump has been floated as a potential challenger. Tillis also made headlines yesterday by announcing his opposition to President Trump's pick for U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. It's a move that likely reflects how precarious his political position has become, especially with outgoing Democratic Governor Roy Cooper widely expected to enter the race. If Cooper runs, it would be a best-case scenario for Democrats. He maintained strong approval ratings through 2 terms, has built-in name recognition, and an established fundraising network. If it comes down to Tillis versus Cooper, expect a razor-thin race, and that's backed up by polling. Cooper has led in all 4 public surveys so far, but only by narrow margins, +1 to +4. Like Maine and Michigan, this race is effectively a toss-up, but if I had to lean one way, I'd give the slight edge to Cooper. Finally, in Georgia, the big news of the month thus far, outgoing Governor Brian Kemp will not run for Senate. It's arguably the worst news Republicans may get all cycle. Kemp would have been the strongest non-incumbent candidate for either party, and likely would have been favored to unseat Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff, despite Ossoff being a strong candidate in his own right. After all, Ossoff made history in 2020 by revolutionizing political fundraising in Georgia and winning a high-profile runoff against then-incumbent Republican David Perdue. Without Kemp, Republicans don't have a remotely comparable replacement. Buddy Carter is currently the most likely nominee, according to Kalshi, followed by Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mike Collins. Not exactly a lineup that inspires confidence in a race of this magnitude. It's also worth pointing out that while much of the country swung sharply to the right between the 2020 and 2024 elections, Georgia and North Carolina did not. Both are undergoing gradual demographic shifts that continue to benefit Democrats, expanding and diversifying urban areas, and an influx of college-educated transplants from liberal-leaning regions in the Northeast and West. Put it all together, and Ossoff now holds a clear edge in what was once shaping up to be Republicans' best flip opportunity. So that gives us a projected 52 to 48 Republican majority, with Democrats netting 2 seats. That's just my current read based on where the national environment and candidate dynamics stand today. But as always, it's still early and the map can shift fast. As always, feel free to share your thoughts on this map in the comments and suggest any other videos or topics you'd like me to cover. That's it for today's video. Shout out to my channel members listed in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed the content. Check out more of my videos here. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.